I saw my own face in the subway tunnel last night, and now I know I'm supposed to die today. The man wearing it stood perfectly still on the tracks, 20 feet away, his head cocked at an angle that made my neck hurt just looking at it. He vanished, but the image burned itself into my brain like a photograph dunked in acid. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my phone on the platform. The screen cracked in a spiderweb pattern, splitting my reflection into a dozen fractured versions of myself when I picked it up. An old woman next to me asked if I was all right, but her voice sounded like it was coming from underwater, distorted and far away. I told her I was fine, because that's what you say when you see the impossible. The thing is, I recognized more than just my face. He was wearing my leather jacket, the one I thrifted 3 years ago, with the broken zipper I never fixed. Same rip in the left knee of his jeans from when I caught it on a fence in college. Even the scar above his right eyebrow, shaped like a fishhook from when my brother pushed me off the swing set when I was 7. Every detail perfect, down to the way my hair falls across my forehead when I forget to use gel. I didn't go home that night. Something primal in my gut told me that going back to my apartment would be like walking into a trap, like a mouse heading straight for the glue board. Instead, I checked into a motel on the outskirts of the city. The kind of place that rents rooms by the hour and doesn't ask questions. The clerk barely looked at me when I paid cash, his eyes glued to a small TV playing static-filled reruns. The room smelled like cigarettes and chemical air freshener, trying desperately to cover up something worse. I pushed a chair against the door and sat on the bed, staring at the peeling wallpaper until my eyes burned. Sleep felt dangerous, like closing your eyes in a room full of wasps. Every car that passed outside made my heart slam against my ribs. Around 3 in the morning, someone knocked on my door. Not a normal knock, not the kind the front desk would do. This was rhythmic, deliberate, the same pattern I use when I knock on my sister's door to annoy her. 3 quick raps, pause, 2 slow ones. Nobody else knows I do that. Nobody living, anyway. I held my breath and didn't move. The knocking continued for exactly 3 minutes. I counted every second and then stopped. Footsteps moved away from the door, slow and casual, like whoever it was had all the time in the world. I crawled to the window and pulled the curtain back just an inch, just enough to see out into the parking lot. He was standing under the flickering streetlight, looking directly at my window. Same face, same jacket, same everything. But this time, he was smiling. It was my smile, the crooked one I've always been self-conscious about, but there was something wrong with it. It stretched too wide, held too long. Like someone who learned how to smile from a manual, but didn't quite understand the concept. I stumbled backward, and my legs hit the bed, sending me sprawling across the stained comforter. When I looked again, the parking lot was empty, except for 3 cars and a shopping cart lying on its side. The streetlight had stopped flickering. For a moment, I wondered if I'd imagined the whole thing, if stress had finally cracked something essential in my brain. My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. The message was a photo, and my stomach dropped when I opened it. It was me, asleep in this exact motel room, taken from the foot of the bed. I could see myself lying on my side, one arm dangling off the edge of the mattress. The timestamp said it was sent 10 minutes from now. I ran, grabbed my wallet and keys, and burst out of that room like it was on fire. Didn't even close the door behind me. The night clerk shouted something, but I was already in my car. Engine roaring to life, tires squealing as I peeled out onto the empty highway. My rearview mirror showed nothing but darkness and distance, but I kept checking it every few seconds anyway. Driving helped me think, gave my hands something to do besides shake. I tried to make sense of what was happening, cycling through explanations that ranged from logical to insane. A stalker with plastic surgery, a twin I never knew about, a breakdown making me hallucinate. None of it fit quite right, like trying to force puzzle pieces together that came from different boxes. The gaslight came on around dawn. I'd been driving in circles for hours, staying on main roads, keeping to places with lights and the possibility of witnesses. I pulled into a 24-hour truck stop, parking right under the brightest lights I could find. My reflection in the car window looked hollow, dark circles under bloodshot eyes. Inside, the fluorescent lights were harsh enough to make my eyes water. A handful of truckers sat scattered across the booths, hunched over coffee and pie, looking like they'd all given up on something important a long time ago. I ordered coffee I didn't want and sat where I could see both the entrance and my car. The waitress had kind eyes and a name tag that said Rita in faded letters. She kept refilling my cup without asking, seemed to sense I needed the routine, the normalcy of coffee being poured, and the clink of ceramic on formica. I almost told her everything, almost let the whole crazy story spill out. But what would she do? Call the cops? A psych ward? That's when I saw him walk past the window. Not rushing, not hiding, just walking casual as anything, hands in the pockets of my jacket. He stopped right outside the glass and pressed his palm against it, fingers spread wide. I noticed he had the same callus on his middle finger that I got from holding pens wrong my entire life. I jumped up so fast I knocked my coffee over, brown liquid spreading across the table and dripping onto the floor. Rita hurried over with a rag, but I was already moving toward the door, some stupid brave part of my brain demanding answers. If I could just confront him, grab him, prove he was real and not some stress hallucination, maybe I could make sense of this. The parking lot was empty. I spun in a circle, scanning between trucks and cars, but he'd vanished again like smoke. My car was fine, undisturbed, but there was something on the windshield, a piece of paper tucked under the wiper blade, folded once. My hands trembled as I pulled it free and opened it. It was a police report. My name, today's date, cause of death listed as suicide. Single gunshot wound to the head, self-inflicted, discovered in my apartment by my landlord. But today hadn't happened yet. This was dated for tonight at 11:47 p.m. The signature at the bottom belonged to Detective Morrison, a real cop I'd met once when my apartment was burgled 2 years ago. The paper felt real, had the weight and texture of official documents. I read it 3 times, looking for signs of forgery, but every detail was perfect. My address, my phone number, my emergency contact listing, my sister Rachel, even a note about my history of depression, which I'd never told anyone about except my therapist. I called Rachel. It rang 4 times before her sleepy voice answered, asking who died that I was calling at 6 in the morning. Hearing her voice, normal and annoyed and alive, made something break loose in my chest. I told her I loved her, that I was sorry for being a bad brother sometimes, that she should know I'd never kill myself no matter what anyone said. She got serious then, asked where I was, told me to stay put and she'd come get me. I gave her the name of the truck stop and sat on the curb next to my car, phone gripped in my hand like a lifeline. The sun was coming up, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange that seemed obscene given the circumstances. How dare the world be beautiful when something was hunting me with my own face? A truck pulled up, not Rachel's car. The driver climbed out, and I felt my reality tilt sideways again because it was me. Older, maybe 50 or 60, with gray streaking through my hair and lines carved deep around my eyes. But unmistakably me, the same nose I got from Dad, the same stupid ears that stick out too far. He sat down next to me on the curb, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. When he spoke, his voice was mine, but weathered, roughened by years of cigarettes. I hadn't started smoking yet. He told me he didn't have much time, that the loop was closing, and he needed me to listen carefully. According to him, I die tonight. Always have, always will, caught in some kind of temporal knot tied around this specific date. He was a version of me that survived, that somehow slipped through a crack in the pattern. But surviving came with conditions. He had to exist outside the timeline, watching the loop repeat, trying to find a way to break it. The man in the mask was another me, one that died differently, violently, murdered instead of suicide. That version was angry about it, broken by it, and wanted to make sure all timelines led to death. A failed version, trying to guarantee all other versions failed to. The mask was his face, my face, before someone caved it in with a tire iron in some other version of tonight. I asked him how to stop it. The older me shook his head, said he'd tried everything across hundreds of loops, and nothing worked. The timeline had momentum, weight, and it wanted me dead at 11:47 p.m. today. Fighting it directly only made it worse, brought more versions of me crawling out of the cracks, each one more damaged than the last. But there was a chance, one option he'd never been able to test. If I could stay alive past midnight, if I could push through that specific moment, the loop might break. The catch was that the closer I got to 11:47, the harder the timeline would push back. Reality itself would bend to make sure I died on schedule. He stood up and looked at me with eyes that held decades of exhaustion I couldn't comprehend. He told me he was rooting for me, that maybe I'd be the one to finally break free. Then he walked behind his truck, and when I followed, seconds later, he was gone. The truck was gone too. Just empty asphalt and an oil stain shaped like a question mark. Rachel arrived 20 minutes later, and I'd never been so happy to see another human being. She hugged me tight enough to crack ribs, smelling like the vanilla shampoo she'd used since high school. I tried to explain everything in the car, but it sounded insane even to my ears. Doppelgangers, and time loops, and prophecies of death. She listened though, didn't interrupt, didn't tell me I was crazy. We went to her place, and she made breakfast while I showered, washing away the sweat and fear of the past 12 hours. Clean clothes, borrowed from her husband, hung loose on my frame. For a few hours, sitting at her kitchen table, watching her kids eat cereal and argue about cartoons, I almost felt normal. But when I checked my phone, I had 17 missed calls from my own number. No voicemails, just the calls, each one placed exactly 11 minutes apart. I showed Rachel and watched the color drain from her face. She asked what we should do, and I realized I'd pulled her into danger, that my proximity might make her a target. I left while she was in the bathroom, took her car keys, and drove off before she could stop me, before whatever was hunting me could use her as leverage. It was 2 p.m., still hours until 11:47, but I could feel time pressing down on me like a physical weight. Every red light felt deliberate. Every close call in traffic felt orchestrated. The masked version appeared in my back seat when I stopped at a red light. I saw him in the rearview mirror, just sitting there, head tilted at that wrong angle. His mask was cracked now, and I could see raw meat underneath, bone fragments catching the light. He reached forward and touched my shoulder, and I felt cold radiate through my entire body. I swerved into oncoming traffic, horns blaring, metal crunching as I sideswiped a sedan. My car spun out and jumped the curb, slamming into a fire hydrant in an explosion of water and steam. When I turned around, the back seat was empty. My shoulder still felt cold where he'd touched me. The cops came, paramedics too, everyone asking if I was all right and what happened. I told them a dog ran into the road, that I swerved to avoid it because the truth would get me committed. They checked me for injuries and found none, not even a bruise, which seemed to puzzle them. The car was totaled though, hood crumpled like paper. I walked away from the accident scene while they were distracted with paperwork. Just walked off down the street, hands in my pockets, trying to blend into the afternoon crowd. My phone said 6:33 p.m., 5 hours and 14 minutes until the moment I was supposed to die. The city felt hostile now, every reflective surface a potential ambush, every stranger's face suspect. I saw myself everywhere, in windows and mirrors and the blank screens of phones. Some of the reflections moved wrong, independently, turning to watch me when I should have been turning away. I found myself at the old playground where I broke my eyebrow, the swing set still there after all these years. Sat on the same swing my brother pushed me from, dragging my feet through the dirt underneath. A memory of that day came back vivid and sharp. The moment of falling, the helpless terror before impact. The sun set in shades of purple and red that looked like bruises. I watched it disappear behind buildings and felt each minute tick by like a countdown to execution. Other versions of me started appearing in the playground, standing at the edges, watching. Young me's, old me's, injured me's, all waiting to see what would happen at 11:47. At 11:30, I understood what I had to do. The older me said, fighting the timeline made it worse. That resistance brought more versions crawling through, so I stopped fighting. I walked to my apartment, the place the police report said I'd be found, climbed the stairs to my door, and went inside. Everything was exactly as I'd left it yesterday morning. Coffee cup in the sink, unmade bed, jacket thrown over the back of the couch. Except there was a gun on my kitchen table that hadn't been there before, black and heavy and inevitable. The timeline providing the means for my prophesied end. I sat down across from it and watched the clock on my microwave count down. 11:42, 11:43, 11:44. The gun sat there like a loaded question. Every version of me I'd seen today had been running, fighting, trying to escape. Maybe that was the trap. Maybe the loop existed because I always ran. At 11:46, I picked up the gun. It felt cold and solid and real, heavier than I expected. I thought about everything that led here, every choice and chance that built the path to this moment. Thought about my sister and her kids, my parents, the life I'd lived that was about to end. At 11:47, I put the gun down and walked out of my apartment. Just left it there on the table and went out my door, down the stairs, into the street. The clock ticked over to 11:48 and nothing happened. No cosmic intervention, no reality collapse, Just a city at night and me still breathing. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from an unknown number. Just 2 words. You're free. I looked around for any version of myself, masked or otherwise, but the street was empty. The weight I'd felt all day lifted, the pressure released, and I knew somehow that the loop had broken. I don't know which version of me sent that text. Maybe the older one, maybe a future one, maybe myself, from a timeline I'll never understand. But I'm still here, still alive, and every breath past midnight feels like a gift I didn't earn but received anyway. Tomorrow, I'll deal with the questions and the aftermath. Tonight, I'm just going to walk until dawn and feel grateful for every step